Hello everybody. Welcome to the event. Thank you all for coming and tuning in from wherever you guys are from. I'm Michelle. I'm the AIA New York City Regional Assistant, and I'm very happy to get this event running today with you guys. So I'm just going to lay out the event for you all today. So we're going to do some intros with the panelists that we have today. And then we're gonna go through a little chat. We're gonna have a moderated Q&A. You guys can get a lot of information from the things we're gonna discuss. And then at 8:45 till 9, that's when I'm gonna open it up to you guys, and you all can have an audience Q&A. There's a Q&A icon at the bottom, but if you can't see that, you can also hit the more button and it should be there, or you can just drop it in the chat and we can go through each of your questions at the end. So try to ask questions that you think can't be found on Google. That would be great. And just to lay down some house rules, please be respectful of all the panelists here today and of their privacy and of their time. So this event is recorded. So everyone, just want to let everyone know that if you're okay with being recorded, we're also taking down notes for today's events, just to have it in written form, and we're gonna send out the recording and those notes in a couple of weeks. So make sure to check your email, and this recording will be uploaded onto YouTube eventually. So you guys will always have it there, and you can hopefully pass it forward, and it'll be really helpful for everyone. So yeah, let's get it started. So like I said before, I'm Michelle and I'm a 3D artist, and I've made a film before. And when it came to talking about music and scoring for my film, I did not know anything. And actually, Kenny, one of our panelists here, was my wonderful composer. And I realized just how much I did not had the tools to communicate as well as I thought I wanted to with Kenny. And there was just so many things that I just didn't know about music that I felt like, oh my gosh, like I wish somebody told me this. Especially for when I was a junior looking into music for my animated films or just films in general. So this was kind of why I wanted to make this event for everybody, just to make that easier for you all. So yeah, I'm gonna hand it all to the panelists, and why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Kenny, would you like to start?
Sure thing. Hi everyone. My name is Kenny Adrian. I'm an Indonesian composer. I'm currently based in LA. Yeah, I worked on short films like Michelle's short film, which I really love. And yeah, short films of different genres. And I've been part of music department for bigger feature films and TV series. One of which is coming on Netflix this year. It's called In Your Dreams. Um, but yeah, excited to be here to share with you all what it's like working with sound post production for your next project, maybe. And yeah, thank you, AIA, for the opportunity to come on here. And thanks, Kathleen, Caitlin, Michelle, and Josh for having us and setting this up.
Awesome. Marc, do you want to go next? Oh, I think you were muted,
Oops, sorry.
Marc.
Yeah, thanks. Like what Kenny said, thank you, you guys for having us. Angelica, Neil, and myself are all from an audio production company, Wavyrn, which I founded a year ago. I am an audio director, but also a composer, and in the past, I have worked on projects such as music editing, Marvel Cinematic Universe soundtracks for Avengers Campus at Disneyland, the Star Wars Hotel, Zootopia, and other theme park attractions and cruises, as well as being an orchestrator and arranger for a number of Hallmark movies and Netflix's animated children's show, Ridley Jones. Since starting my audio production company, we do full service audio production on multimedia, whether it's games, films, animation, podcast, audiobooks. even musicals and more. And what that means is we do everything on those projects, from music to sound design to voiceover, casting, contracting, budgeting, and generally being the interface between our clients and also the audio teams. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I guess I'll pass it off to Neil.
Sure. Hey, I'm Neil. I am a technical sound designer at Wavyrn, but also just sound designer for film and games. I've worked on a couple SVA projects as well as some more biomedical stuff at MIT. So yeah, I just do sound design. It's awesome. Thank you for having us again. Angelica, would you like to go?
Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm Angelica, and I'm a technical assistant at Wavyrn, which basically means I do whatever Mark needs, whether that be music prep or project scoping or help with recording sessions. Outside of Wavyrn, I am a composer, but I mainly do musical theater directing and compositions. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, you guys. So I just want to throw in a fun question before we get the ball rolling. What is something that is recently inspiring you as of late? It can be anything. So feel free to share.
Should I say something?
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead, Kenny.
I would say the movie Sinners. I don't know if it's too late to say that, but I'm sure a lot of people have watched it by now. But yes, I'm seeing some approvals on the chat. But yeah, that movie was really great. Um, yeah, story-wise, I just really love when movies aren't just like one thing. Cause no hate to vampire lovers, but I'm not like the biggest like, oh my gosh, like a new vampire movie. But it turned out to be something else, and having like historical meaning and all these ties, and yeah, I just love everything. And of course, the score is great. So yeah, that's something that's inspired me lately. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, part of the reason I love doing what we do is that every project we work on brings on its own unique challenges and inspirations. And that's sort of what drives the project forward. It's all about the vision. And so our studio, we're working on a couple of things right now. We're working on a horror game where the music is in a sense very much inspired by Severance. We're working on a musical where the music is very much inspired by Epic the Musical and also Hadestown, Dear Evan Hansen. And we are also working on a game where the music is very much inspired by Genshin Impact. So I have been listening to a ton of that music recently, and I love it.
Yeah, so for me, I've been kind of getting into these like Western, but kind of contemporary Western films. So films like There Will Be Blood, games like Red Dead Redemption, things like that, where there's not a lot of sorry composers, where there's not a lot of music that's going on, and it's really carried by the sound design and dialogue. And yeah, that's really what's inspiring me. Oh, Westerns are back. Oh yes, especially with Brokeback Mountain being in theaters again.
Uh, I have a radically different answer, I guess. There's a graphic novel called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. I can't remember the author right now, but it's very gory, which I wasn't expecting because it looks like a children's illustrated novel, but the art style combined with the murder mystery type story was really intriguing to me, and it's nice to discover new works that help with my thought process that I don't usually try to consume.
Right, that's so awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, all those they ate though. But kind of jumping on Neil's quip, I guess could you all clarify what you do in your various roles, or what is unique about your role?
Sure thing. Let me go. So film composers, as the name says, we write music to film, and it's a really special and fun job because, especially with animation, animation can tend to rely more on music because it doesn't, benefit from the nuanced acting from human actors. right? So like music does a lot to really shift and really complete the story. And it's just fun. Like, you really you write to what's on screen, and yeah, you help make everything look better, basically.
As an audio director, I oversee the entire audio production process for projects. And I've already given a glimpse of what that means. So it's not just music, sound design, which Neil is going to talk more about, and voiceover, which Angelica is going to talk more about. But it's also all of the interfacing between the clients and the audio team. And it's so important to have someone who is supervising audio on your team. So what that work entails is project management, working with multiple composers and sound designers and voiceover casting directors and voiceover producers, mixing and editing engineers, recording engineers, doing session coordination to do large scale or small scale recording sessions, whether it's an orchestra or a small chamber band or a musical, knowing all the ins and outs of contracting an audio team to work on your project, such as sync licenses and mechanical licenses and intellectual property. Also, all about budgeting as well, and knowing sort of what is the standard and what's the expectation for the level of work that you're going to get from your audio team, as well as like scheduling. That's a super big thing. And then last but not least, just being that person who's going to help you talk to your composers and sound designers because one thing that I've encountered a lot of on indie projects is that you as an individual might look for a composer or a sound designer to work on your team, but perhaps you don't have a background in audio. Perhaps they're fresh out of the gate as well. So who's going to be there to help guide the process and to talk about like uh, the schedule and the budgeting, the contracting, and all that. So I'm really there to help with that line of communication between everyone. All right, passing it off to you.
Yeah. So in sound design, what I do is I create sound effects for like different actions that are going on screen. So maybe people are like running, I could do the footsteps, that kind of thing. It involves a lot of field recording and any sample libraries, all this kind of stuff. We even handle like ambient noises, so think like wind or very just creating the ambience, whatever, of the scene at that point. And then it also could be like synthetic sounds, so think like lasers and stuff. That's all handled by sound designers.
Taking it over to voice really quick, I help codify the audition processes and casting calls for any project that requires voice actors because every project is looking for something a little bit different. Some need maybe one or two VAs. If it's a larger video game style project, they may want 10 or more, and those will require different types of casting calls and different types of audition processes in order to get through any number of auditions that come in. I help with that, and I also help with prepping for recording sessions that can happen live in studio or they can happen virtually over Zoom if your actor has the right equipment.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Okay, so let's say I am an artist, I'm a filmmaker, and I have a film I want to make and I want it to be scored. So, how can we as artists or filmmakers best prepare for best prepare to collaborate with you guys in your respective fields?
Right. So I think before you approach a composer, or when you like want to post that you're looking for a composer or sound team, you want to make sure that you have all the details of your project available to you, like to tell. This could be a pitch deck, this could be a document, but basically just like general information about your film that would be really helpful for this composer or the sound team to know. Things like the log line, title, what it looks like. An animatic would be great, or like concept art at least, just for the prospective composer or sound team to know, oh, this is what it's going to look like. And then yeah, like knowing when you want to be done with this project would be good because this is helpful info to know for whoever's interested in applying for or doing your project to know like, oh, okay, when do I allocate time to do this project if I were to do this project? And what kind of music are you looking for? What kind of sound are you looking for? This is where, sometimes people have call out posts that have like a link to their Spotify inspiration playlist. I find that always really helpful because it gives you a good idea of like, oh, okay, this is the kind of sound that you want. Yeah. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I think you really want to start thinking about audio from very early on. Because depending on what it is that you need in audio, some of it might even start in pre-production. And this is one of those things where if this is a small indie project where you are handling everything yourself, this is really where you want to talk to someone who is experienced in managing projects to help you figure out what are all of the processes of getting audio. Um, this presentation that we're doing now probably wouldn't even be long enough to really go through every step of the process, but just to give you guys an idea of some of the things that you want to start thinking about is that I'll give you guys an example where we worked on a musical theater film a while ago. And what that process involved was that we actually had to work on the music way before um, anything was animated because we recorded scratch tracks with video footage of the instruments and the vocalists so that they could be animated, and then we re-recorded it over the animation. So depending on what your project's needs are, the production scope and the scale and the budget that can really change. So I would really advise that you start thinking about audio and talking to someone who knows a bit about audio from very early on. Even if it's not an audio director or a producer like myself, even just getting a friend who has some experience with like editing some dialogue for your film or something, even they will be able to offer some insight that you might go like, oh, I didn't think about this before. That's something that I need to consider in my schedule.
All that sounds really good. Another thing that I'll tag along here is figure out what, if you're looking at a couple different options for your composers or sound designers, I would take a look at what kind of sound design or what kind of compositions they do and see if that really fits within what you want. If this is like a student project and they're saying, I want to explore doing this, maybe give them a shot too. Just kind of figure it out, test the waters. Also knowing how long the film is super important. I would also say, sure, like in that pitch deck, say how long your film is.
I'm going to loop back to what Mark said about sometimes having to record sound or music before you start animating, especially if you're using voice actors. You have to get the actors in and recording before you animate because if you do it, if you animate what your characters are saying and then have the voice actors try to dub over the lip flaps, it is going to be so much harder on them than if they were to just say the line naturally, because they're going to have to match up to how you have animated. And if they don't, then you're going to have to make corrections, and it's going to be a bit of a mess. So I would highly suggest getting your actors in before you start animating anything, and that way you can also get visual references from them, because chances are they will also have good facial expressions or gestures that you can put into the way you animate specific characters.
Thank you. That is so helpful. It's super useful from what everyone said. So I guess my next question is, how can we, as again, artists or filmmakers, provide feedback for you all? Because I remember talking to Kenny, she's sending me like a first draft, and I'm trying to communicate to her like, oh, I want this to sound like happy, or I want this to sound sad. And but I didn't know how to express like what I wanted this to sound like. And Kenny would be like, wait, what does that mean? And then I realized I was like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like that's probably not helpful at all. So I guess are there any terms that you guys think we as artists should know to help make feedback between us and you guys a lot more easier and constructive?
Yeah. So definitely don't be afraid to be as descriptive as possible. You can use as many adjectives as you need. Like I understand like when I first started doing like short films, there was because I was in music school and we were all surrounded by all music people, so we all kind of speak the same language. And then you do your first like project outside of school and then you're like, whoa, like we use totally different languages. I don't know what you exactly, like the director would say like, oh, I want this to be bigger, and I think immediately like more orchestra, and then I give it to the director and he's like, no, 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 this is too much. And I'm like, oh no, like something's not clicking. But over the different projects, I've learned that just being really descriptive and like specific, or use as many adjectives as you need. The easiest way also is for filmmakers or animators, if you struggle to describe what exactly you're looking for, you can always find an existing piece of music as reference, and we will not take offense to be like, like, oh, I really like this thing that this Wes Anderson movie has, like this twinkly sound. I don't know what instrument it is, but can you have something like that? Things like that would be really helpful and points you in a closer direction of where the score should be going. And just a friendly reminder that the composer will try their best to emulate what you want, but they will not replicate, because that would be an infringement on copyright. We don't want that. Um, but yeah, this is why also the spotting session is a really important time. We can talk about that later. But yeah, best time to say what type of sound you want in detail is during the spotting session. Like also like maybe like just one term that I don't know if everyone's familiar with, but there's one term called Mickey Mousing, especially with animation. You see this a lot. It's basically when the music highlights an action or highlights basically what's going on screen. Like say, a glass drops, a glass breaks, and then you want like a cymbal crash or something like that. Do you want the composer to really highlight that through the music? Because sometimes composers already have the instinct like to do that, but maybe the type of film that you're trying to make is something more serious, something that isn't as lighthearted, so you don't want them to do that. So that's when during spotting, ideally is when you would say these things, like what you want. um yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I so I've worked on a number of projects in varying capacities as a music editor, sound designer, video producer, composer, etc. And I think that sort of to take a little bit of weight off of your guys' shoulders, the responsibility is ultimately the audio teams to sort of bring your vision to life. But at the end of the day, it's a collaborative effort. And one really important thing to understand is that everyone is doing their best. You may not know all the terms about audio. The composer, the sound designer may not know all the terms about animation, but really it's just a matter of like, I want this, I'm feeling this. Okay, let's find a reference. Okay, I think I got it. And then they're gonna try something. And that takes a considerable amount of time and energy and effort to do that. And sometimes, now I'm not saying that you should settle for less, but sometimes it's important to acknowledge that the audio team may come up with their own interpretations of the vision, and that in some cases it may be good for the project. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, and that's totally okay. Um, so I have a couple of tips when it comes to communication. One is when it comes to talking about revision notes, as important as talking about things that you don't like is talking about things that you do like. Because when you talk about things that you don't like, that is great. That is fantastic. We know to avoid that. But if you can also talk about all the things that you do like, then your audio team knows that is something that they should do more of. And I think that's something that needs to be said more often. Um, One other thing is, as Kenny mentioned, finding references is really great. Um, because sometimes our ideas are so abstract in concept, if you can find a reference, even if it's not perfect, you find a reference where you can pinpoint, like, at this timestamp, this is a thing I like. At this timestamp, there's this sound that I don't like. Maybe the composer or sound designer will understand what you mean by that. And then the last thing about understanding terms is, as I said, at the end of the day, everyone is just trying their best. But I think from an audio director perspective, the most important thing that I want to tell you guys is music, sound design, and VO are three different things. For small projects, the composer will probably end up mixing their own tracks, and that's okay. Sometimes you might find a sound designer who's also a composer who's also a sound designer, and that's totally fine. But it's not uncommon in our field to hear someone say, "Ah, you're a composer, cool. So, how are you gonna do the ambiances for this outdoors scene?" And it's suddenly like, wait, that's not a music thing. So there is a little bit of blurriness. The lines are kind of gray sometimes between music and sound design, but you just want to be aware of the fact that these are three different fields.
Yeah, Mark said it all. I don't know what else to say, but I agree with the separation of feedback. So I'll just go straight into terms here. Foley versus synthetic sound design, that's kind of a big thing. So if you want something that's really like, I'm moving this napkin around, that's Foley. And then any sort of electronic stuff. So think like you're in a spaceship console and you're like going and like swiping things around, that would be more of synthetic stuff, and that would be used that we would create those sounds using like synthesizers and stuff. So if you want to have that kind of terminology, if you want to say, oh, I really want Foley here, even though it looks kind of, even though they're in like space suits or something, say that you want Foley there. But yeah, that kind of thing. That's what I've seen mostly in terms of key terms that people should know. So yeah.
Going off of the topic of separating feedback, a point I really want to hammer in voiceover wise is the difference in the way you need to be acting during auditions and casting versus when you actually have the voice actors and are coaching them on how to say their lines, because there is two separate types of feedback you need to give them. For when you have the casting call, it's like you wrote the script, you know the characters, but it is different than direction. I guess to put it in an analogy, it's like when you go see a production of the same show at two separate theaters. It's the same script written by one person, but each show has two different directors. So some characters are interpreted a little bit differently. When you start with your casting call, you need to be the script writer. You need to be like, okay, this is the voice type for this character. And when I say voice type, I mean, do you want masculine, feminine, high or low, androgynous? What's the inflection their voice has? Does it rise in weird places? What's the rate of their voice? Do they speak fast? Do they speak slow? Do they have an accent? Stuff like that, that is completely objective about the character, is going to be in the casting call. Once you have those voice actors and are moving into the recording session, then you can act as a director. So let's say you have a character that's really gruff and you know that they soften up over time, so you want their voice to get softer. That's not something you put on a casting call. That is something you tell the voice actor when they are in the booth, so that way they can deliver the lines that way.
Awesome. Thank you again. Super helpful and so different from among you guys. So I guess more to the logistics side of things, how long should we expect to work with you guys? And what should we plan for timelines, deadlines, or schedules and things like that?
Yeah, so this again, this would depend on when you bring us in. Like Mark said, the sooner the better, because it gives you both time to kind of, especially for the sound team, also to give them time to get acquainted with the world of your story and the composer to like potentially experiment on what sounds you want. But to give an idea of the timeline and the workflow of the composer, say, okay, you settle on, not settle, but like you found your composer and you want to work together. What happens is basically for me, I like to get talking with the team and really get to know the story, get to know the characters, make sure I'm on the same page as them about where the story is going, what it's trying to say. And this is the time to talk more about the inspo playlist if they have it and what they kind of imagine for the story. For me personally, I like making demos for the story if in the beginning stage if there's a lot of time, and if it's a story that calls for like a thematic writing, which I particularly really like. Um, but I just find having writing kind of a demo just to get a sense of the sonic palette of the story makes it easier later on when I score, because we already established with the director what kind of sounds you like, what kind of textures you like, and I just need to incorporate that into the score. And then after that is when we would go into spotting. So spotting is when you go on like maybe a Zoom meeting and then you share what rough cut or lock cut that you have. Um, Hopefully with time code. Time code is really important um, to talk about, okay, this is when I want the music to start. This is when I want the music to end. This is the best time again to talk about what you really want down to the details. Say like there's an action you want to highlight, or there's a mood that you want to highlight that you think may not show like obviously at first glance. This is when you would say it, and then the composer would kind of take these notes of the time frames and incorporate that into the score, and then it becomes its own cues. Um, and then, yeah, again, this is why it's really important to have time code on your video files. I'm sure Mark is gonna say more about this because I think he knows more about this. But yeah, after that we go into scoring, and then I like scoring per cue and then just sending it off to the director for them to see and give notes as I work on the next thing. This just makes revising like faster for me. And then revisions, and then I would send in the final mix. While I send unfinalized music, I just send a bounce clip of the scenes, and then at the end I send a wave file or like the audio file. So rough timeline would be like maybe a month or 2 months, again depending on when we're brought in, and also depending on when the submission deadline is. But yeah, that's like a general idea of the timeline and workflow when I start working on a short film.
Um, I'd say 6 to 8 weeks is the time that you need. So it's very important that when you're delivering your cut to your audio team, that you deliver to them what is called a locked cut. There are no more timing changes. For you, it might be very easy to just move 1 or 2 frames. For the audio team, it means having to re-render audio files and sometimes even rewriting music or redesigning sound effects. Now, if things don't have to be colored, if things don't have to be properly lit, what's really important for the audio team is to have a locked cut. And then this is where the 6 to 8 weeks come from. First, it's really 4 weeks. Give your audio team, for something short and reasonable, 2 weeks to do a first draft. Then bake in 1 week for revisions, and then another week for more revisions. And then add in 2 buffer weeks in case they need to record anything or do any mixing and editing. If you have people who are doing all of the mixing for like music, sound effects, VO, or whatever. So that's 6 weeks. And then you have 2 weeks of buffer, one at the start, one at the end, so that your schedule is comfortably padded. And you can spend that first week doing the spotting session. The spotting session is really important. This is a meeting that you need to have with your audio team, with your composers and your sound designers. And the spotting session, you watch the short film. Sorry to assume short film, whatever project it is that you're working on. But it could be a short film, it could be a feature-length film, it could be a musical, it could be whatever. You go through it minute by minute, second by second, and you talk about this is where I want the music to come in. This is where I want the music to come out. What kind of shoes is that character wearing? What does that sound like? Is this backpack heavy or is it light? What's the ambience here? Is the city ambience busy or is it empty and kind of quiet? What do we want the music to do here? The character says something really important here. Let's do something with the music right here. Let's bring the music back down. Let's make it happy. Let's make it sad. So it's very important to have a spawning session. Now, this 68 weeks that I'm talking about is a very basic schedule for something like a short film or a small project that you're working on. As you've probably heard us say like 50 times now, it really depends on the projects. There's so many variables, and I've even talked about VO. Yet, which Angelica would talk more about, but that is something that needs to happen in pre-production, right? So, yeah, 68 weeks for the audio post-production. Um, that's a very general answer.
Yeah, I would definitely hammer in the lock cut because sound effects are so tied to what's happening on the screen that it can be super difficult to work on films if the animation isn't there. It's also great to have some temp sound effects in so that the sound designer has a reference for where and how the sound effect is timed as well. Of course, you're going to give the time code, but always nice to hear something there. Um, Especially if it's something that you actually do want to reference. I agree with Mark with the schedule. Don't have any pointers there, but um, yeah, that's something super important.
As Mark previously said, it is important for the voiceover production to start doing this casting process and subsequent recording sessions as soon as possible in order for your project to be successful. The casting process does not have a specific timeline, but I would suggest maybe 2 to 3 weeks, if not more, for the first round of regular auditions, and then much shorter, week to a week and a half for callbacks. You must keep in mind, though, that depending on the volume of auditions you get, it will take your audio team a longer time to go through them and get to the results for the next round of auditions. Mark and I recently did a project where we got hundreds. How much? What was the number, Mark, that we got?
Yeah, so just to throw some numbers out there, we're working on a game project right now, and we received about 7,000 auditions for that within a couple of months, and that included working with some major actors and contracting them through SAG-AFTRA. We're working on a musical as well, where we just put out the casting call a couple of days ago, and that has been blowing up already with something like 100,000 views on that post already. So the casting process can take a bit depending on the project. Or you get your roommate to record something, a couple lines for you or something. That's not uncommon.
Yeah, the casting process obviously does not have to be that long, especially if you're on a tight deadline. But if it's not going to be that long, you need to make sure you're getting the reach that you want. So you're doing all the marketing you can to get that casting call out there. After you're done the audition process, the recording sessions were probably going to be an hour to 3 hours, depending on how many lines you want recorded. One other thing to mention regarding that is if your film or game involves a song with a vocalist, you not only need time to record with them, you need time to rehearse with them. The vocalist will probably obviously be able to teach themselves, but I would highly suggest getting a music director, to someone that is specifically there to teach the vocalist how to sing the song the way you want it. Some voiceover producers, like myself, already happen to be music directors for other things, so I can help teach the vocalist. But sometimes your audio team may not have that capability, so they will have to hire out for another person. So keep that in mind if you are involving a vocalist.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Okay, I guess now is the question that I'm sure most people will have in mind, and I'm sure it's great to talk about, is what is, I guess, a budget or an approximate that we should set aside for working with you in your experience?
Right. We discussed this previously, and I think Mark has a really good way of saying it. So, Mark, take the floor.
Oh, thanks. Um, yeah, so budget is such a mysterious and foreboding and overwhelming topic for many audio and non-audio people. Um, and I have a really simple way of boiling down the budget. How many hours of work is it? And what's their hourly wage? Right. So if we think about it, $100 per minute of music is sort of where a lot of student projects fall. That's on the lower end. If you think about it, 1 minute of music, that takes at least a couple hours to write, right? So $20 per hour, that's like 5 hours. And then you're also wanting revisions on top of that. And we don't know how complicated those revisions are. So we're kind of pushing right the minimum wage there. Something that's a little bit more reasonable usually is about $150 per minute of audio for each person that's working on it, that is. Something that is much higher quality and you would definitely want to make sure that you're getting someone who knows what they're doing would be $300 per minute of audio. But that is a very, very generic answer that I'm giving you. I can throw some other numbers around. Things that you might consider um, are you getting sound effects assets from someone? Maybe you're not animating for a film. Maybe you're animating for a game and you're the developer of the game and you need sound effects. What's that going to cost? Casting is something to consider as well. And then, what if you are looking for live music? What if you're looking for a vocalist? A vocalist might charge something different. So there are a lot of different factors. But I think when it comes to speaking to a more indie community, um, the the really big thing that you want to think about is how many hours and minimum wage, right? I have worked on projects before where it was totally like they said, "Oh yeah, I have $50 to do this film, and I need music for a full thing." And I said, "How long do you think it takes to write music?" Right? Um, Let's see. I had one other thing I wanted to say. I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, I worked on another project where this one's interesting. I worked on a project where the director had paid X amount of money for an audio team to work on their project. And for reasons that were not necessarily disclosed, that audio team was no longer working on their project. So they contacted us and were like, hey, can you guys step in and do audio on this project? And I was like, okay, but now we have less time to do it. We have 2 weeks, so we might charge a rush fee. And what they told me was, oh, I thought it would be less money because you're working on it for less time. Right. And these kinds of conversations that we have are not uncommon with people. So I think there's one really important thing to keep in mind, which is a mutual sense of respect for each other's work. And that's not just about you guys respecting the audio team, but also the audio team respecting what you do as well. There's a lot of work that goes into each part of a film, and you guys, as primarily animators who work on films, I'm sure you know a lot of hours are spent into different things, and the animation team has so many different people on it that we don't know anything about. And it's sort of the exact same way for the audio team. So this is a conversation that you want to approach respectfully with your composer, with your sound designer, or your voice actors. You want to really acknowledge the level of work that they're putting into your project and understand the scope of the work, how long is it going to take, and what's a living wage for them. So yeah, that would be a great place to start.
Thanks, Mark. I think that was super helpful, and I think it breaks a lot of like the uncomfortableness about that. But thank you. Okay, so thanks, guys. I think now we're gonna head into the audience Q&As. So first up, Kanako asked, "Hi, I'm a composer. How do you get scoring gigs? Any platforms that work well?"
Oh, okay. Scoring gigs, it could come from a lot of things. It's hard to pinpoint like exactly one thing. I've approached and have been approached for scoring gigs, so it's definitely, it's very competitive. There's a lot of, especially if you're around other composers or if you're in music school. You sign up for like a newsletter for like a thing, and then everyone's on it the minute there's someone looking for a composer. But Instagram is always a great resource. Go to film festivals. I think that's what I found really like inspiring here. Being in LA, is there's a lot of events surrounding film, and if you find these events, you go to them and you talk to strangers, and they might have a project that might need sound. So I think getting yourself out there, being visible, and just talking to people, meeting people. Generally, I think it's a good way to start. But internet is also great. You can always take advantage.
All right. Whoever asked this, Kaneko, I'm gonna give you the most real, most blunt answer. Get a job that pays your bills. Right? You can't do all of these trips and go to festivals and reach out to people if you don't have the money to be making those sorts of expenses. You don't have time or budget to do those recording sessions unless you have a job that can pay for it, right? Um, I think what is really important to acknowledge about composing work, but also audio work in general, is that this is gig work. Unless you're working for a big studio or with a big composer, which is a totally valid career path as well. That's where Kenny and I sort of split. Kenny is working with a pretty big composer. We're doing freelance things. We're doing pretty well with our studio, but we started off just finding gigs, right? The place to start is make sure that you are living comfortably because the last thing you want is for this job hunt to ruin your passion for writing music. Music, at the end of the day, is a creative art. So is sound design, so is voiceover and voice acting. It's so important that you don't lose that flame inside of you to do that because you enjoy doing it. So make sure that you're able to support yourself first, and that is going to enable you to go even further.
I actually, if I can jump in, I have a really weird answer to this question. If you're looking for scoring projects that are maybe a little bit lighter and a little bit more for fun rather than for the completely business related in order to dip your toes in, I would suggest looking in fandom spaces because chances are there are a lot of creatives that are just sharing their projects and they will probably need music for it if it's just like, or they'll need actors if they want to fan dub something, or if they want to make an animatic. When I don't know if anyone in this crowd knows Dropout, but when the Dropout Discord server was still active, a lot of people would just be sharing their artistic work and asking for help. So it's not bad to look through those small niche fandom spaces and try and find creatives that maybe have similar interests to you.
Mhm. Thank you guys. That's awesome. And thanks, Kanako, for the question. Okay, so next one, Carol asks, I guess this is a two-parter. So the first part of it is, what would you say are the necessary skills to develop to be an audio director, especially coming from a sound background? And the next part of that question is, what is the difference between an audio director and an audio producer?
That's a great question. Uh, what skills are needed to become an audio director? That's a great question. Um, I don't know if I have the perfect answer for you. What I can say is that everything that I've done has sort of led to me becoming an audio director. And it's not because I had these grand plans to become an audio director, but it was always because I'm someone who constantly tries to push myself. Um, I am learning skills for things that are unrelated to audio, things like spreadsheets, coding, things like using task management softwares like Jira and Asana and Slack, things like managing my own recording sessions, things like bringing my friends on to do projects because they're a sound designer and I'm not, and then we ended up starting a studio. It was always about what is the next thing that I can do. And if you can do that, if you can propel yourself like that, you will have what it takes to become an audio director. Because what an audio director is responsible for is taking initiative on the project and thinking about everything that needs to happen, right? Because other people are not necessarily trained in that. And it was something that I said earlier that you guys might end up working with a composer or a sound designer who might not know like what budgeting and scheduling expectations are. And that's okay. It's an entirely different skill set. So I would say that a great place to start is you just want to learn as much as possible about management, particularly, and building teams, communication, uh, scheduling, taking initiative is so important. And then looking at the next question that you had, distinctions between an audio director versus an audio producer. Also a great question. Um, it's the difference is in the credits that you can be called an audio director or an audio producer. Like, you ever see those A-list actors and they get credited as an executive producer, and you know it means nothing? Right? It's because they funded the movie or whatever. There are some slight nuances in what those roles do. A director um is also responsible for the creative direction, but production is specifically logistics and management. So that would be the difference. But it is not uncommon to see a lot of like crossover in responsibilities between those roles. Perhaps other roles that you should think of are a music uh, coordinator is someone who is in charge of contracting musicians specifically for recording sessions. Whereas a music supervisor is someone who also shares those responsibilities, but they're more in charge of licensing music and budgeting and contracting and looking into audio libraries. Again, there's a lot of gray area. You might bring a composer onto your team who's experienced with that, and they just might do it. So there isn't like too clear of a distinction. They share a lot of responsibilities, but directing is more about creative and production is more about logistics.
Mhm. Thanks, Mark. Okay, next question. Sorry. Olivia asks, if I have an animatic, does it help or hurt you if I put it in temp music or sound design? Is it annoying if a filmmaker were to say something like, I want it to sound like Philip Glass or like this movie scene? And I guess their follow-up to that was, what makes scratch temp audio more useful to you?
Okay, so temp music, I don't think it hurts the composer. I think, I know some people, might prefer not having temp at all and be like, okay, like I have complete creative freedom to kind of start from scratch of what you want. But I think for most people, I think it's helpful because it gives you at least an idea of when you want music to start, music to end, apart from what they're doing in the music itself, because that could change too. But I think if anything, it helps the the music composer, and then I want it to sound like Philip Glass or like this movie scene. Well, I mean, as I said before, the composer will try their best to emulate what you want, what you like out of this Philip Glass thing or what this scene, but they can't replicate because we will be going into copyright territory. But yeah, just keeping in mind. Oh, but the tricky thing with temp is sometimes I have filmmakers that have worked on this cut for so long with this temp for so long that they kind of get stuck in this like, oh, you know what? This temp just sounds the best, but it's like this, song that I can't, buy the rights to and blah blah. Blah. Just when you put in a temp, just make sure that you understand it is a temp and that you're bringing in a composer to hopefully emulate something that's better than the temp, but it's a good foundation to go off of, is what I would say, I think. But yeah, Neil, what do you think about sound design wise?
For sure. I think again, it's as I said before, it was super helpful. I think that it's totally fine for someone to say, I would like it to sound like this, especially if it's not expected. Maybe you want something to sound very unrealistic for like a very realistic sound. Like, oh, I'm throwing a ball, but the ball makes like this boing thing, not like a boom, right? So that's super helpful for me to know. And that going into Ellie's question here, Foley or synthetic, this temp audio would help you figure that out and help the sound designer figure out whether it's Foley or synthetic. So I think temp audio is great here.
Yeah, just jumping in real quick, I'll chip in a couple words. Having references is so good. I love references. Two quick things about it is one, make sure that you say what you like and don't like about it. One time I worked on a project where they said they wanted uh, grungy underground crime music. And I told them, okay, so are we thinking like jazz noir, something like that, jazzy, like those black and white movies, detective movies? And they're like, yeah, let's do that. I wrote it. They didn't like the music. They said, this is what we're thinking of. And then they sent me hip hop tracks, right? Completely left field. So make sure you actually listen to references. That you point out the things that you like and don't like. And then the last thing is what Kenny said about being attached to the temp. You want to be careful about that. It's one thing to really like a temp and to feel like, oh, the music isn't fitting it, but it's another to trust a composer when they say, okay, there isn't I don't know how much more I can get it close to the temp. There was a couple of projects that I've worked on where I don't know, you guys have probably noticed that a lot of blockbuster movie music in the past 10 years have sounded so generic. And part of that is just temp. They just want the wah from Hans Zimmer or something like that, right? Um we don't want to plagiarize for sure.
I'm
Um,
also going to jump in really, really
mhm.
quick. Just in case of when you have voice actors, when you're sending out casting call, I would recommend just describing what voice you want and not putting in a vocal reference. Because if you like say, "Oh, I want this character to sound like J. Michael Tatum," instead of having actors give their authentic voice, they might be trying to imitate J. Michael Tatum to get to be what you want. And an impersonation of someone that already exists is not what you want.
Thanks, guys. Okay, we're hitting 9 o'clock. I just wanted to check in with the panelists. We have a couple more audience questions here. How are you guys feeling? Do you want to continue a bit more, or how are we feeling, guys? Panelists.
I'm good to go.
I can take one more and then I do need to head out, but I can take one more.
Okay. Okay, so Sana asks, do directors and composers have specific genres of music they specialize in, or is it a jack of all trades vibe?
Okay. So I mean, it kind of is a jack of all trades vibe. You can have stuff you specialize in, but it is a gig line of work. So most people, they want to get as much gigs as possible. So you kind of have to be jack of all trades. In an ideal world, right? Like I would only want to write like whimsical stuff or orchestral stuff, but that's just not the market, is it? Like not everyone wants that type of thing. So as composers, as sound people, you gotta be really flexible and really be open to experimenting different stuff. Of course, you can be known to be really good at like a specific genre. That's always a good thing. But I think, as composers, I think it's always good to be someone that's reliable to, filmmakers or animators, like you want people that know you to be like, oh yeah, like I should definitely go to her or go to him for this film for my music because I trust them completely. Like they know what they're doing, even if they might not know this genre of music. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, Kenny is absolutely right. Part of our job is to be a jack of all trades, because people want different things and you don't want a ton of vision yourself. That's part of the reason why I started a production company. We're a team of 15 people, all with different specializations, that do a bunch of different things. So even though audio people are supposed to be jack of all trades, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good at being a jack of all trades. And I'm sorry to I'm sorry to like pull off the disguise of all the composers and sound designers out there. So one thing that's very important is that you do uh, look for demo reels. You look at work that they've done. You check out what they've done so that you know that they are actually capable of doing what it is that you want them to do. And that's part of the gig work. That's why we want to be jack of all trades, and that's why the market is so tough. So definitely do check out people's demo reels and see what kind of stuff they've done in the past.
One thing that I do want to add is don't be ashamed if you do know that you are a lot better in one genre than another. It's okay. Uh, Perfect example. I am technically a film composer, but my strength is in musical theater related things. I know how to format a PV. I know how to orchestrate for musical theater. I know how to rehearse voice actors, specific things like that. It's okay if you know you're really strong in that and need to get better. You will be able to get better in the other things, but don't negate what your core genre has given you in terms of strength and skills.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Um, Mark, are you about to head out or are you, how
Yeah,
are you doing?
I have to head out, unfortunately. I do want to say, well, you guys can hang out if you guys want to and answer more questions. But before I head out, I want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to AIA for having us. Thank you to Kenny and Neil and Angelica for being here on this panel with me, and thank you to all the people that are here. And I also want to say that if there are any questions that I'm able to answer and offer some insight on, you guys are more than happy to contact our general studio email, which I'm gonna put in the chat right here. Feel free to send anything my way. I love to chat. I can yap all day long. Uh, but yeah, thank you.
Oh wait, Mark, before
Heading
you
out.
go,
Yeah.
we're gonna take a picture. So we have a
Yes.
picture with you in it,
Okay.
and everyone can
Ooh.
Okay.
stay. We will
Super
continue
good.
asking the questions.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, everyone, get your face
Okay,
cards
guys.
out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if you haven't been showing yourself, all
Okay.
show yourself
Everyone
now.
smile. I'm three,
Three,
two,
two.
one. Thank
Right.
you, Mark, for joining
Bye.
Thank
us.
you,
Yep.
Mark.
All
All
right.
right, we will continue with the questions because we still got quite a few more. So
Yes.
if you guys want to hang around. Ellie asks, is it ever appropriate to tell a composer or sound designer that they have creative freedom to do what they think is best, or is the lack of direction frustrating? I'd love to let a composer have fun with what they make, but without making their job more difficult.
Okay, that's really sweet, by the way. But Yeah, I mean, I don't know any composer that would be mad hearing creative, like, do whatever you think is best. But also, it's really ideal, like hearing that, but also I think more often than not, I mean, not more often than not, but like to kind of make it more efficient, especially if we're on a deadline, especially if we're on a tight deadline, I think just having like at least one track or kind of like maybe this is where a demo would be really helpful just as a start before the composer actually starts scoring to picture, just to make a demo piece of what they think this should sound like to test basically. You would present, like, the composer should probably make that and then present that to the filmmaker to be like, hey, before I start scoring, I just want to see if we're on the same page. This is what I kind of created from what the log line or what this character is telling me. Do you like it? Like, do you hate it? Like, what do you think? I think that's what I would prefer instead of like, okay, like you're giving me creative freedom to do everything and I'm gonna just start scoring and it turns out it's exactly the opposite of what you had in mind. So, just to avoid that scenario, I think maybe demoing or having just one reference track would be helpful, just to make sure that we're not wasting time trying to figure out.
Yeah. For sound design, I think that creative freedom is good. I think during the spotting session, it would be super important to really nail down what you want a person to feel in certain moments, or and like the audience, because again, going back to that like ball thing, right? It could be a very cartoonish ball or it could be a very realistic ball. So that is something that definitely needs to be addressed in the spotting session. Um, and that would be like a comedic tone versus a very serious tone, right? So I think that getting those details documented, ironed out ASAP, I think that will really help in terms of like the creative freedom, do whatever you want approach. Um, yeah.
Okay, so Carla asks, do the composers just have instruments readily available to make music as soon as possible? And if the music has vocals, how does that work?
Yeah, so we have this amazing thing called Contact and virtual instruments. So we don't necessarily need physical instruments to record, or you can also do that. But most composers these days, we have a library of virtual instruments that's ready to go, ready to make. So it's really fast. Like you can do a whole score and have it all be virtual without recording, because recording live players is great, but it also you gotta put that into the budget because that's we're gonna have to pay the players. So just keep that in mind. It's always great. Like I would, if everything could be recorded, that's preferable. But obviously, they also need to be paid. So that's going to cost more in the budget in the long run. So yes, composers do have virtual instruments ready to make music as soon as possible. And for vocals, I haven't had too many opportunities to use vocals in score. But if you're talking about like having song in the score, then that would kind of be more like songwriting territory. So um, there are some composers that also kind of shadow as songwriters. Not everyone does, but there are instances where filmmakers would have lyrics already, and then you want the composers to kind of like help you figure out the melody to it. I think composers, they can help that, and then they can probably kind of talk like make the melody with piano or something, and then we will it differs through everyone, but we will probably help like find a vocalist together. And this is where like if Marc was here, I'm sure he would jump in. And this is where like having an audio director would be really helpful because they would kind of help contract vocalists and kind of direct these things as they go. Because sometimes not all composers are familiar with this process.
I can actually help and jump in on that because I have worked on the musical theater film with Marc. So what usually happens is if you have a vocalist, they are going to need a track to practice and record to. Now, this doesn't have to be the live instruments. If you don't have the live instruments recorded yet, this can just be a MIDI mock-up of the song, and that is what the vocalist will use to record to. And then after the vocalist is done recording their singing, then you can add in all the live instruments also playing to that initial MIDI mock-up track, so everyone's timing is the same. In terms of writing the song, you would want to check with your composer if songwriting is in their field and if they are comfortable with lyrics, because some people are composer lyricists, some people are not. And if you are doing the lyricism, or you hire a different lyricist, then you need to be communicating that with your composer, because then the composer and the lyricist will have to work together on the song in order to make it sound cohesive.
Thank you. Thank you, Angelica. That was super helpful. All right, next question is from Ellie again. Ellie says, I'm an artist, so I don't know much about music copyright. What is the process of sampling something from an existing piece? I'm working on my thesis and I would like to sample popular classical pieces, but not get into trouble, of course.
Right. I think for anyone, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of classical pieces are public domain, and I think as far as they're public domain, you can use them. But yeah, I am also not super well versed in like explaining about the copyright, but generally, I think if they're public domain, they're pretty safe. But you wanna also you know, if you have friends that are studying music business, or you know someone that knows this really well, I think it's a good idea to ask them, you know, like what if what you're doing is safe. Generally, I think that's what I think.
Going off what you said about public domain, I believe right now any music written prior to 1928, 1929-ish is in public domain, which means it's free to use. So mostly old classical pieces should be public domain right now. If you're looking at anything past the year 1928, 1929, then you will have to get a license to use that music most likely, and that will cost you a pretty decent amount of money depending on how much you want to use.
Evan asks, is voiceover finalized and included in the locked cut of a film before the spotting session?
Not necessarily. It depends on when you have the locked cut to give to the composer. That just means that the timing is not going to change, but that doesn't necessarily mean the animation has to be done. So as long as the timing is the same, then you can get started on the music. But once the animation, um, then you can do voiceover either concurrently with that or before or after that, depending on how much of audio you want to do at once. Does that make sense?
Okay, we're getting to final three questions. So Sophia asks, I keep hearing terms like mixing and mastering. What is the difference between these terms? And should those be required skills as a sound designer or a music composer?
Okay, yeah, mixing and mastering. They're kind of similar, but also not. Mixing is basically where I would say most of the grunt work is, because how do I say this? Mixing is where you know, you take all these different stems of all these different instruments, and then you play around with the balance, make sure everything sounds cohesive. Um, you know, you filter out things that might not sound good, that might, you know, like I can get really technical, but I shouldn't. But yeah, mixing is basically the hard part, I would say. Mastering is more like polishing. Before you really send it out, the final mix, you want to just make sure, you know, like if you're baking a cake, this is like the final like frosting. You want to make sure everything's in place and everything sounds the way it's supposed to sound in different mediums. Neil or Angelica, if you want to add.
Yeah, you don't have to be particularly good at mixing and mastering if you're a composer. Um, the way or we do it at Wavyrn is that we have specific people that are there to mix and master audio because some of our composers, myself included, are not very well versed in that. And that's okay. That's a completely different skill set to have to creating music.
As a sound designer, mixing should definitely you should know how to do that for your own sound effects. In the context of the whole film, you are not in charge of doing the whole mix or master, even though sometimes that comes with working with smaller projects. Um, so for your own stuff, you should know how to mix it, but for the whole film, mixing and mastering, no, you're all good.
Nice. So I guess this is something for you, Angelica, but how often do you bring in dialect or accent coaches as part of the voiceover recording sessions?
That would depend on if your voice actors can already do the accent you want. I did one short film with Marc recently where it took place in China, and our voice actors could already speak Chinese because that was a requirement from the casting call. So if you would like them to already have that underneath their belt, I would highly suggest putting in the casting call. If they don't, then I would bring in a dialect or accent coach, but that might cost you extra money.
Got it. Okay. Last audience question, and then I'll leave you all with the last question in general. So Kayla asks, apart from the initial rates for the payment, how should the filmmaker approach residual agreements with the sound workers, especially if the film score or music is uploaded to platforms such as Spotify and etc.?
Mm, this usually you would include this kind of a clause on the contract. There's a template for it, but I forgot to mention it. But usually composers they're usually represented by PROs, so they usually take care of the residual stuff. We know Spotify doesn't really pay that much, but so I don't think it's a big worry at this point, unless you're dealing with someone like Hans Zimmer and that lot. That might be more of a concern. But I think residuals for now, I think, it's usually just like you understand that this music is still the composer's, but it is, free, it's for you to use in your film. And, the composers agree that, if it's okay when it's uploaded to certain platforms like Spotify or like YouTube or film festivals and stuff like that. I'm sorry, like if this is too like all over the place, but if anyone wants to add something, feel free.
I think you pretty much covered it. I know that Neil, correct me if I'm wrong. I know Marc usually with anything he writes, he just puts stuff on Spotify, but that's not necessarily to generate revenue. It's more so that he has stuff out there for his reels and his resume.
Yeah. Um, sound design is different, doesn't really work the same way. So, um, a lot of that stuff we do end up getting more of a flat fee for that. But when if it's televised and stuff, maybe there are residuals. But for like these student projects, it's not like we upload to Spotify the soundscape. Like, I mean, we could, I guess, but it's not the same.
Awesome. Okay, well, those are all the audience questions. I just wanted to do another check-in with the panelists. Do you want to do a quick lightning round to just lighten up the end, or do you just want one final one and we can wrap it up here?
I'm cool with whatever.
Same, I'm down for whatever you want to throw at
I
me.
think we're all a little too indecisive for this.
Okay, well, I'll throw in some questions for the lightning round and then we can slowly start to wrap up near 9:30. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, what is the favorite project that you've worked on?
Ooh, is it cheesy to say it's the short film that we worked on together?
Yeah.
I I loved working on that. If no one, if you know, if you don't know Michelle, I worked on Michelle's short film. It was her thesis film. It was called Care for You. It was just special to me because Michelle and I, we knew each other back in Indonesia. Through this media that I was doing. And I just randomly reached out when I was in college just to be like, hey, like, I think like if you're doing like animation, if you need music for your film, like I'd be down. And she was like, oh, well, I'm like, I happen to be working on my film soon and it's going to be set in Indonesia and it'd be cool if you got to work on it. So I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's really cool. And I got to do stuff on it that was an homage to home and being here, and that was one of my earlier projects, so that was just really special to me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Neil.
yes, me. Sorry. I was like getting ready.
Yes, thinking, yes.
Um, so much for lightning. Um, yeah, one of my favorite film projects I've worked on is Puddle. I don't know if y'all know that. It was an SVA short film. Super cute cat sounds. That was great to work on. That was so good. Yeah, for film, that's what it is.
My favorite project that I've worked on with Wavyrn so far is a video game that I worked on with Marc, where we got to record a huge choir for it, we got to record a rock band, and we got to go to Budapest and record with a larger scoring orchestra. So that was pretty fun.
Nice. Wait, it sounds so cool. Okay, so I guess I know we said recent inspiration, but I guess what is your greatest project inspiration? Or I guess like what was something that made you be like, yes, okay, I want to do this.
Ooh, I think I really like. I mean, I know everyone would say like Joy Saishi, and I also agree, but I also really like Alexander Desplat. And for those that don't know, he composes the score for Wes Anderson films, most of them. I don't know if he did the latest one. I think he did, but it's just like his type of sound is just something that really inspires me. It's like really whimsical and really light. Like I love the score to Fantastic Mr. Fox, that and Grand Budapest Hotel, everything. Shape of Water too, really really interesting and pretty. Yeah, Little Women, yes. Yeah, what about you, Neil?
Um, I get a lot more inspiration from games. I think that there's a lot happening, and my favorite part about sound design is like communication and user design, which is why I worked on a lot of stuff at MIT. So, Fortnite, Fortnite is kind of huge because every single sound effect, it tells you so much. There's so much information in one sound effect. Um, Same again, I'll bring up Red Dead Redemption and of course like the way that sound design is used narratively in There Will Be Blood. Also Paris, Texas, if anyone knows that film as well.
On my end, a lot of musical theater influences. Big ones are Stephen Sondheim and Dave Malloy. Stephen Sondheim is a bit more of a recognizable name. Sweeney Todd, Into the Woods, Sunday in the Park with George. I love everything he does. Dave Malloy is the guy that did Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, and he does a lot of avant-garde contemporary music, which is very weird in a musical theater setting, and I quite enjoy it. In terms of film, um, I'm gonna give a quick shout out to Alan Menken because he did all of the songs for his Disney movies, yes, but he also composed all the scores for his Disney movies. Little me, little 7-year-old me was sitting there watching The Hunchback of Notre Dame, eyes wide at everything he was doing.
Yes, yes. All right. What do people misunderstand the most about your job?
Ooh, I think not really misunderstand, but I think people sometimes forget that film composing especially, is just as technical as it is creative. Because we are writing to a piece of film or like clip medium, and there are technical things that we do, like sync points again, which is why like time codes are so important. And also why working with a lock cut is very, very much preferred. Because, at the minute, like you're just like, you receive a new cut, you did a whole thing on this like clip, you did a whole orchestra thing, and then they're like, oh, like we have like a small edit, like you can barely see it, and then it changes like everything, and you gotta move everything. I think people forget that. There's still a technical aspect to it. But it's part of the gig. It's occupational hazard.
I'm gonna be real, I totally blanked on the question.
It was, what do people misunderstand the most about your job?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think that they think I do everything. They think I can mix and master in 5.1 and all this kind of crazy stuff, which I guess I can. I could do that, but it's gonna take me way longer than someone who like majored or, that's their career, right? So I think that being a sound designer, there might be some, you know, you need to like kind of tone down and ask, what actually do you do? Which is the whole point of this meeting. So this is great.
Going back specifically to voiceover, I find the thing that people misunderstand the most is what I was talking about earlier, the difference between objective information about a character and directions you give to a character. Because when you're doing a casting call, you've created this world and you love it. I get it. It's okay because you have this huge backstory for your character, and then you have a huge paragraph for the personality. But the actor does not need to know that when auditioning. That is great for you and for any promotional material you might be using, but it's not good for people that are auditioning for a role.
Okay, well, what do you guys love the most about your job?
Ooh, I think seeing it come together with the film, especially with animation, most of the time you're probably going to be working on a rough, you know, version of what the film will be looking like either some stills are still storyboard stills, or it's not colored yet, or there's no lighting yet, or, yeah, you get the gist. So when you finally see it all like finished, with the music, with the sounds, it's just like, oh wow, I was part of that. That's like I just like that feeling. Yeah, it's for me.
I love seeing how people react to audio as a whole, but also like, are they going games? Are they going to take the audio cue and say, oh, maybe I should go this way or I should go that way? I love seeing how people react to what I've done because it's out of my hands at that point, and I want people to take and interpret whatever they want from my sound and see how creative they can be. It's really about the user, not me.
I really love the recording session process, actually. I find that I really tend to focus and concentrate the best when the situation is kind of tight. So whenever I'm taking session notes and we are on a specific deadline and I am locked in and it feels so good.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're running at the end of our event. Um, and I just wanted to say thank you for all the panelists for coming on for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the AIA team. Thank you, Josh, for note taking, and Caitlin for helping as well. And thank you to you guys. Thank you to the audience. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. And thank you to the AIA members. So, yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you for spending time with us. Just a reminder to check your emails in the next couple of weeks. We're going to have all the notes here, and the YouTube link to this recording will be up. So, yeah, thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your night, or wherever you were from. Have a great rest of your day. So.
Thank you.
Thank you guys
Bye.
so much. Thank you so much, Kenny, Neil, and Angelica, and everyone else.